2016. So the companies are moving very rapidly as they can, based on the funding that we've given them to be able to be ready to fly as soon as they can. I would be hesitant to say we could accelerate it any more than a year, but we could potentially accelerate it by a year if we were given adequate funding.
And
I can't say that about everything. I can say that, you know, companies are poised.
right, right. And speaking of funding, what are the impacts of reducing NASA's education programs? I think that Ami touched on it just a little bit.
NASA spends $17.6 billion on STEM education. I don't think people really get it. I spend a lot of time in classrooms. I spend a lot of time doing Skype. I spend a lot of time doing VTCs with schools because I can't go to every school. I don't make a trip anywhere, particularly outside the United States, that I don't do an outreach event and try to help our partner nations with their STEM education programs, because everybody faces the same thing we do. Everyone's concerned about the reductions that they see in the Office of Education, but it is making us hungry to find new ways to collaborate with other agencies. We did a program with the Department of Education. It is their 21st Century Communities and Learning program. NASA essentially did the program for them because we could bring astronauts into the classroom via downlink TV from the International Space Station. We were paid $300,000 to kind of put it together. They invested $5 million. You know, that probably would have cost the nation $10 million last year. But we are learning how to collaborate with each other. We are not, I know everybody's worried about losing money. We're finding that synergy among federal agencies is working for us. The 4-H is in every single county in this nation, every single county. NASA has, you know, the Space Grant Consortium in 50 states. Compare every single county to 50 states. We're now talking about working with collaboratively with 4-H. That's going to magnify greatly the number of kids that we're able to reach with STEM education enrichment. So I'm not worried about our ability to do our job. With STEM outreach it is us. I mean, we do that every day.
It's, in your opinion, is there any way to evaluate, you know, like whether or not these, like let's say that we make cuts to the programs, are there real ways to evaluate whether or not these cuts are having an impact on future achievement, or you know, we talk a lot in this committee about being able to aspire young people to, you know, want to reach, you know, certain goals as it relates to, you know, STEM-related jobs.
Without a doubt. NASA's education program this year, for the first time, is outcome-based, which means you got to have metrics. So we are looking at, now, we are not allowed, because of privacy, we can't map a child from elementary school through college. The Department of Education can. The National Science Foundation can, because they're authorized to do those kinds of things. So by our collaborating with DOE, with the Department of Education and the National Science Foundation, they can do the metrics that tell us, okay, how many kids that participated in Summer of Innovation last summer, 10 years from now, are doctors or lawyers or things like that. Those are the metrics about which you speak. And although I can't do it, I can get it now based on the collaborations that we have. And it's taken time. You know, everybody wants to see something now. We just started Summer of Innovation. We had to battle to get it. I think it's been around now 4 years. And we are now seeing factual data, not anecdotal data. We're looking at numbers of kids.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Now recognize the gentleman from Florida, Mr. Posey.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. General, I had a chance to thank Seth, and I had a chance to thank Bob Cabana for the common sense, no-cost outreach that NASA did to reach thousands of people who were indifferent pretty much previously to space and now seem to be enthusiastic about it. And I just hadn't had a chance to thank you personally for that. And I think it's great. That's how we help spread the message. A couple of things, you know, as to funding, I don't think any of us are where we would like to be with funding. But I think we're in a whole lot better place than we were here a year ago with the uncertainty about sequestration. So you know, I'm trying to look at a glass half full in that regard, pretty much as you are. We need a deep space plan, Moon and Mars. There's no doubt about that, and we also need low Earth orbit options. So I know it's tight balancing that, and in space politics, you're always going to have some that want all one way and some that want the other way, and I hope that we will continue to understand that we do need both and go forward like that. A concern that I have, and I discussed it briefly with Dr. Holdren yesterday, and he referred to a recent agreement that NASA has with Department of Energy over our space fuel supply. I wonder if you could bring me up to date on that a little bit.
Yes, sir. We have reached an agreement with DOE. They produce the plutonium pellets that we need. And so we're still in negotiations right now trying to understand how do we help them improve their facilities. Just the infrastructure that's needed to press the pellets for propulsion. We have enough right now in our stockpile to be able to fly the missions that are presently on the books for us, Mars 2020 and the like. But we have to work better with DOE to make sure that they can make the improvements to their infrastructure so that they can efficiently make the pellets that we need. We have lots of fuel, but it's old, and it needs new fuel, to mix in it to make it good. So
they're not in the process of destroying any or getting rid of any that you're aware of, or using it for anything else other than space?
I will have to take that for the record. I don't know the answer to that, sir.
Would you just find out? I would kind of like that assurance that it's not being used elsewhere for other things, or.
Yeah, I will, and I'll take that for the record. I don't know.
Okay. Thank you, General. Any other comments you'd like to make about keeping on track with both?
It's a balance. And I come to this hearing, I feel better about where we are than ever before, to be quite honest. I just wish, I wanted to commend the chairman and ranking member because of the way they're working together. We got to do better than we're doing. I don't want to sit here and say what was the responsibility of the Bush administration, what happened in the Obama administration. As Congressman Barra said, what's done is done. We can't undo that. We can make a difference for the future. The thing that I will say is, what I'm talking about, none of us are going to be sitting around here in charge. I had some young people, MLLP, they had to leave mid-level leadership program. They're young, growing leaders in NASA, and they just wanted to see how we do this stuff. That's who's going to do all this stuff we're talking about. Deep space exploration is hard, and we cannot jump to Mars. We have to develop the technologies. We've got to be confident that our systems are going to work. That's why, when Chairman Smith asked about a Mars flyby is great, but it doesn't do anything for us in terms of deep space exploration. If the crew survives, and I have doubts about that, that's why I'm not a fan of a one-time Mars flyby. Okay, we've done a one-time Mars flyby. As great as Apollo was, and it was awesome, we never stayed on the surface of the moon for more than days. If we're going to go to the surface of the moon, we better stay there for a month or 2 months, or we're not going to learn anything about the impact of less than 1 gravity on the brain or on other kinds.
But do we agree, unless at some point there's the ability to leave this Earth, the survival of our species is threatened?
I'm not a fatalist, but we do need to be able to be a multi-planet species.
A realist. We're trying to look at eternity. We're trying to look at the future.
One of these days, our sun, you and I won't see it, Nobody we know will see it, but one of these days our sun's going to burn out. It's a star. And it would be nice if we have become a multi-planet species by then, and we're not just on Mars. By then, people will be living in other solar systems because the solar system will go away. We got to get beyond. Like my granddaughter says, she says, "OG, you're thinking about Mars. I'm going way beyond that," and she's right. When the sun gives out, this solar system goes away.
We have to think about planting trees.
Yes.
For
other
future generations. Yes. That
exactly.
The shade from which we'll never expect to have. And I like Neil deGrasse Tyson when he says, space is truly the only investment we make for future generations.
Yes, sir. I agree.
Gentleman's time has expired.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I now recognize the gentleman from Arizona, Mr. Schweikert.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and General. Part of what I want to sort of have a quick dialogue is just the mechanics internally under your review of how you set priorities and the decision-making and the inputs and those things, because you know, I know you have a lot of voices and a lot of people tugging on your coat saying, we want this, we want that. Something like Sophia.
Yes.
Because now that was really coming online just within the last 12 months or so, correct?
Sophia is a 10, I mean, it's been under development for probably 10 years.
But in full, you know, with collection?
It was beginning to fly and fly well.
So internally, when you're doing your prioritizations and mechanics, tell me the review process you go over, and let's just use Sophia just because I'm somewhat familiar with that, on how you prioritize a program like that you have a decade of time and money and
inside the Science Mission Directorate. They have, I forget what they call their council, but every year they get the wise people of the science community, and they evaluate our programs to see, okay, what I've asked them to do for me right now is we got a lot of programs that have been flying for a long time, long past their planned lifetime. They are expensive. We have to pay for those. So when we prioritize what we're going to get from our science portfolio, we try to make sure we have a balance, Earth, space, everything. And Sophia ended up in the prioritization. Sophia was down here. When you talk about James Webb getting ready to come online, Spitzer, other sources of data that's very similar to what Sophia gives us. Sophia is a unique asset.
Well, and I don't want to put words in your mouth because I'm reaching back. Because I remember it may have been a year or so ago, you were actually somewhat a fan of Sophia.
I am a fan of Sophia. I'm a fan of anything that has wings.
So walk me. So mechanically, share with me the internal process under your authority tree on how they would prioritize Sophia.
Yeah.
I mean. And how it ended up where it is.
We would go to the science community and ask how, you know, based on what we expect to get in our budget, what do you want to continue to operate? And the one thing I keep cautioning is, if we are going to put new systems online, if we're going to bring about new technology, better sensors than we have today, what are you going to give up? Because the science community doesn't like to give up anything.
But does that become more of a conversation of let's enhance what we have, or is it to cancel or I mean,
well, you never say what are we going to cancel. That is not a question. The question is, how do we operate within our budget and provide science responses to the scientific objectives set by the decadal surveys, set by the outside advisory committee, set by Congress.
So as right now you sort of understand your budget request and where you see things going. Tell me where Sophia sits
low
in that. So it just is a low priority.
Because it is not a low priority. I said that flippantly, and I shouldn't have said that. In comparison with other projects in the science portfolio, Sophia did not rise to the level that we decided we were either going to terminate another program or we have options with Sophia. And as Dr. Holdren mentioned, I think yesterday, we do have options with Sophia. We don't know what the 2015 budget is going to be.
So when
you know, we could end up with enough money that we have not stopped flying Sophia. Everybody's panicking. We are working with our German partners to find ways that we can enhance the utilization of Sophia for the rest of this fiscal year. We may not put it into upgrade, for example.
But when you're doing your layers of priorities, opportunity, growth, and security initiative, and those. I'm trying to get a better understanding of how something like this falls into when you're building those priorities.
There, I'm trying to buy it. If you look at the at our list of things in the opportunity, growth, security initiative, almost every one of them is something that is either in existence right now, and I'm trying to buy down risk. $150 million to commercial crew. If the Congress grants our request for 848, takes it to $1 billion. That's buying down risk.
Okay, and just because my time, and I had two quick, do you think the Germans would be willing to take on more of the heavy lift on the cost of the mechanics?
That is one of the alternatives. However, to be very candid, they don't seem to be willing to do that.
If we put their flag first on the airplane. Okay.
Well, no. We are looking at all alternatives for Sophia. I will have to say, though, you know, Sophia is a joint project. The United States, NASA, is unable to assume all responsibility for Sophia.
Okay, my second, and this is just because it's outside my skill set, space station.
Yes.
How long can it go unmanned? You know, if it sat there for, I mean, what is there sort of a, when you cross over a maintenance curve? I'm sort of curious if there's a data point.
You don't want to go. I will have to take that for a if you really want me to tell you how long we can go if we deorbit.
Yeah. No. If let's say it sat up there for 36 months.
It can't sit up there for 36 months unoccupied. We've got to have people that are repairing. The ammonia pump that went out, that was an emergency. That was a contingency for which we had to do a contingency spacewalk and all that. If there's no crew, that doesn't get done.
So in many ways for maintenance and just sort of you almost have to constantly keep it touch.
You talk about leverage. Everybody's excited because the Russians have the leverage on transportation. When you talk about navigation, communications, power, the United States has significant leverage on the international space.
Mr. Chairman, I'm so sorry. I just looked at the clock and I was having fun here. Thank you for your patience.
You ask great questions.
All great questions. Now recognize the gentleman from New York, Mr. Collins.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And there's nothing wrong, Congressman, with having some fun.
Around here it is.
Yeah, okay. General Bolden, my question really surrounds the chart you've already showed and the human exploration roadmap that's in both the authorization bills in the Senate and the House, as well as the minority's version, that we need to help assess us and the merits of the asteroid retrieval mission. So the chart you've been showing a little bit today doesn't outline what you'd want to call the specific set of capabilities and technologies required to extend human presence to the surface of Mars, or the mission sets necessary to demonstrate the proficiencies of these capabilities that the House version asked for. It doesn't include the information on the phasing of planned intermediate destinations, Mars mission risk areas, and the potential risk mitigation approaches that are required by the bill offered by Ms. Edwards. And it does not include a description of the utility of an expanded human presence in cislunar space toward enabling missions to various lunar orbits, the lunar surfaces, asteroids, the Mars system, and other destinations of interest. So, until the administration provides the detailed information on the asteroid retrieval mission, including how it fits into a broader exploration architecture, I assume Congress is going to continue to view some of this project skeptically, which brings me to the question. NASA's budget request includes $180 million for the asteroid redirect mission. So last year at the budget hearing, I wasn't here, but I have been informed that you told the committee that a mission formulation review would be done over the summer. But now it's been a year since the mission was announced. NASA has not completed the mission formulation review, and what I was told is just last week you released a broad agency announcement for information and held an open forum yesterday to solicit even more input. So when is NASA going to actually have a plan for the mission that the committee can review, and how can you be sure that the mission is in fact a stepping stone to Mars, as the BAA claims, without a human exploration roadmap?
My estimate would be that over the next year we will continue to refine the concept for the asteroid redirect mission. There are two big potential ways that we could do it right now, and that's what we're evaluating. That's the reason we continue to go to the community, industry, academia, and entrepreneurs, to be quite honest, trying to determine whether we want to use a small is a relative term, where we grasp the asteroid and fly along with it and thrust against it, or whether we go to a large asteroid, take a large boulder from it. So that has to be determined, and that will determine the specifics of the mission, what type vehicle you use and everything. We know that no matter what we do, we're going to need solar electric propulsion. So we have identified that as a if you will, a hurdle to being able to do an asteroid redirect mission. Also a hurdle to getting to Mars, because we know that's what we're going to use for cargo.
Well, you know, in the tough budget environment we're in, clearly I would say the more information you can provide to Congress, the more likely you can get buy-in. And if things start to slip or commitments are made and not met, I think you can understand that's viewed problematically. And again, what I was told was yesterday when NASA presented to the scientific community, it was the opinion of some that the information that was presented was a broader set of data and information than has already been shared with this committee or with Congress. So, you know, in a priority setting, I guess I would just simply encourage NASA to give us more data than we asked for, so that, you know, we're not feeling as though we're left out of the loop or that we're not important, because you can understand the result if that is the feeling, which I think it is somewhat.
I appreciate and intend to respond to that request. And I would hope, I look at the staff in the back, I am told that we have been regularly briefing the staff on the progress with the asteroid redirect mission. So if that's not true, somebody shake their head, no, that's not true, and I will go back and
Well, I think the staff should be shaking their head no, because clearly, as someone new to the committee, very directly, they asked me to probe this because they don't feel like it's been so. So there's a,
have they not, been getting any information or not been getting sufficient information? That's
well,
important.
not sufficient. If
Okay,
you're not
then
getting
they
sufficient
are getting-
information, you might as well not get
Robert
any.
Lightfoot, who is my associate administrator, usually he leads the team up here. If it's insufficient information, it's because we don't know. If it is no information, it's because I'm being misled in thinking that they're coming up.
Well, I don't think anyone would suggest it's no information, but to some extent, insufficient information means decisions can't be made.
It means we don't have enough information to make an informed decision. That's all it means.
Well, again, I would just encourage you, and I don't think it's saying anything new, just the more information you can get this committee, the more likely you'll see
Exactly, and
the
I
committee.
understand that, and again, I'll go back to my comments earlier. There are big things happening. I would encourage people, part of getting ready for the asteroid redirect mission is having a vehicle to take the crew. If you go to the Kennedy Space Center, you will see Orion. It's a spacecraft. It's not a drawing, and it will fly next fall, this coming before the end of the year. If you go to Michoud, you will see components of SLS that are under construction, whether they're barrel assemblies for the fuel tank or whether they're domes or whatever. That's real hardware. We're not talking about drawings anymore, and that's all a part of getting to the asteroid redirect mission. So that may not be sufficient, but that's all we have is hardware. If that's not sufficient, I don't know how to do better.
Thank you, General Bolton. My time's expired. Sorry, Mr. Chairman.
That's fine. Great questions by all the members of the committee. At this time, General, you're not going to get off without a second round of questions.
That's good.
So I'll open it up for myself, and this is similar to a follow-up on commercial crew. Last year, the Associate Administrator Bill Gerstenmaier said basically 90% of all the development costs for the commercial crew is being paid for by the American taxpayer. And we know that the commercial crew contract's going to be similar to what the cargo was, anywhere from $7 to $11 billion or greater. So we're just thinking. You mentioned that if you don't get the funding, that the schedule will slip beyond 2017. Is there anything that NASA can actually do to entice these companies to actually put more skin into the game, perhaps?
Mr. Chairman,
and if yes or no,
I am confused by a number you just gave. Our total expenditure, unless my charts are wrong, the total expenditure on COTS over the 5 years that I've been the NASA administrator from the taxpayer was we were appropriated $782 million, and we obligated $780.
Yeah, we're not talking about
even
COTS,
a billion.
talking about commercial crew. And I'm
commercial
talking
crew
about the value of the contracts that these companies are going to receive from $7 to $11 million, estimated value for flying, cargo and crew. So I'm saying, we're basically paying 90% of the development cost.
Well, that's what the $782 million
right. Is there a way to get them to maybe put more money into the program.
They do. That's
to
the
meet
reason.
schedule?
That's why I mentioned earlier when you said how have we managed to stay on cost, or I mean on target, on schedule, if you haven't given us what we asked for. It's because the companies have paid more than they would have normally paid. That's the only way they can produce hardware.
Yeah.
We only paid them what we had. So I would have to go back. I'll take for the
Okay,
record to verify the 90% number. I would
mean,
be surprised if we're paying 90% of the cost of commercial crew development to this date. I would be really surprised.
I mean, that's from a hearing that we had September 14th, 2012.
And I'm told the information is proprietary, but I'll go back and I'll take that for the record.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. At this time, I recognize the ranking member.
Thanks. Just very quickly, I do want to follow this up because earlier when you mentioned, I thought you had misspoken that the industry participants of the commercial crew program were providing more money than NASA. That doesn't seem to be the information that we have. So is it possible for you to provide the committee with the amounts that each of the even at some level, the amounts that each of the industry participants is putting in and NASA so that we can see that? Because otherwise, I think all of us are under the impression that NASA, that the taxpayer is actually providing the bulk of the support for commercial crew.
As I
is
said,
that wrong?
I will take that for the record.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you. And then you also, I mean, and you can hear that, I don't think we've coordinated our questions for you, but what you can hear is a concern around the asteroid retrieval mission. And so I wonder if you would be prepared by a date certain to provide the committee with a roadmap and the analysis of the various options that there would be testing different kinds of technology for this plan to Mars. And so some of us, for example, have thought, well, maybe the moon makes sense as a sort of test bed. Others, the ISS, and others, the asteroid retrieval mission, or maybe some combination. But when would you be able to provide a roadmap with the analysis comparing these options and the technologies that would be derived to the committee?
Congresswoman, I'll go back. It was my impression, because I keep referring to it every time I come forward, we have two matrices. One shows human ratings, human performance, human concerns. The other one shows technology gaps. And we have had that. I look at that. I've been looking at it for a couple of years, and I thought we made that available to the committee, which shows these are things that we are accomplishing on the International Space Station. These are things that we will accomplish with the asteroid redirect mission. But I will take that for the record and go back and make sure we have shared those matrices with your staffs and with you, because I thought we had done.
What about lunar? I mean, so here's what we're wrestling with here. We have some different ideas on this committee about what makes sense, but if you all aren't providing us with a real roadmap that outlines the technologies and then maybe says, here's our scientific analysis about why this doesn't make sense over the other, it would help us to make a more informed decision from a budget perspective and from an authorizing perspective of what it is that we need to, to look at. And I think that the questions that you've heard on the committee go to that point. I mean, it would help the chairman and I very much to have that in hand, and it would help for you to say, here's a date certain by which NASA can give that to us. Okay. I want to incorporate that date, quite frankly, if we're to do an authorization, because then we can come back and evaluate what makes sense going forward, and that deeply impacts budget. And don't leave the moon out, because you can hear the concern here on the committee.
We won't leave the moon out, but
I'm not saying that's where I am personally.
Well, but
it's
I'm just saying
committee.
I can state with certainty the reason the moon we don't talk about it is because there is no technological advantage to go to the moon. There is no challenge technologically to go to the lunar surface except money.
So in providing something to this committee, it would be very helpful to have that analysis, to have the scientific, sort of basis for that decision, and also to have the buy-in collectively from the community about a direction, because I think if we had that, we'd make some very important decisions about what direction
we will attempt to
need
do
go.
that. I have to caution, hoping that the community, whichever community you're talking about, if you're talking about the science community, hopefully buy-in is not all will agree. That will never happen.
Okay.
There is the lunar community, and they are not in favor of anything. Now we're talking about ideologues. So
Well,
there is a community.
Give us an analysis, and then let us know who's for and against. I mean,
Okay.
an analysis that will help us in our decision making, so that what you want and what NASA needs is for this committee all to be on the same page about the direction. That will help you as well as it will help us. Thank you.
I'll take that.
Now I recognize the gentleman from Alabama, Mr. Brooks.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Administrator, back to the issue with Russia and our ability to get to the International Space Station. What would be the consequences to the operational capabilities of the space station if within the next year Russia chooses to deny us access by no longer allowing us to hitch a ride on their rockets?
As I mentioned before, because we provide navigation, communications, power, and as I responded to somebody else, station would probably, and I hate to deal in conjecture, the partners would probably have to shut the space station down.
And if the space station is shut down...
If you're thinking that the Russians will continue to operate the International Space Station, can't be done.
And if the space station is shut down for an extended period of time, say
We're not,
years,
I
more or
don't need
less?
it. I will not need it. I will come to this, I will go to the president and recommend that we terminate SLS and Orion, because without the International Space Station, I have no vehicle to do the medical tests, the technology development, and we're fooling everybody that we can go to deep space if the International Space Station is not there. That's the reason that we and Roscosmos and ESA and JAXA and everyone agree that, hey, no matter what else is going on the surface of Earth, if we want to do this global exploration roadmap to which 12 different nations signed up, we have to have the International Space Station. That's the reason that the president said, okay, I'll agree to extend it to 2024, and we're going, I mean, you know, I don't want anyone to think that I need an SLS or Orion if I don't have the International Space Station.
Well, let me make sure I understand the sequence of events from your testimony.
Very, very plainly.
Let me make sure I understand the sequence of events from your testimony, and you correct me if I err. If the Russians deny us access to the International Space Station, it's your testimony that because of what services we provide to the International Space Station, you would have to shut it down. And if the International Space Station is shut down, you in turn would then see no reason to have the Space Launch System or Orion, so is it fair for me to infer that you would then recommend that those programs be shut down too?
And I need to correct what I said if I said it. I don't know that the Russians denying us access, you know, you're assuming that they come today and say, okay, you're not going anymore, and we're not going to bring your crew home, so figure out how to get them home. I don't think that any of those contingencies are going to happen.
Well, I understand that there are probabilities that are involved.
You're giving me, and I don't accept that as a viable supposition.
I'm one of those that believes in planning for all contingencies. It's much like the effort to acquire an asteroid.
We didn't plan on the contingencies.
I don't think that the odds of an asteroid hitting us in the next few years are very big, but nonetheless, to me, that is an interesting mission because of the risk associated with one eventually hitting Earth and our having the capability of being able to thwart that. Granted, the Russians may not, over the next couple of years, shut us off from access to the International Space Station, and all they have to do is deny us the ride that we keep thumbing with them, which they, if they're willing to attack other nations, it doesn't seem beyond the realm of possibility that they also might be willing to deny American astronauts rides to the International Space Station. But having said that, if the International Space Station is shut down for any extended period of time, can it be resuscitated?
I will take that for the record. You know, anything can be done. You're asking for suppositions, Congressman Brooks.
Well, I'm asking for your expertise and insight on that subject.
I am not an expert on the environmental control and life support system of the International Space Station. So I said I will take that for the record.
Thank you.
I mean, There is no either or in terms of SLS and Orion and commercial crew, and I don't know how many ways to say that.
All right.
I know there are a lot of you who would like
thank
to say
thank you. You've answered my question.
Bear with me. You
well,
asked
if the chairman
question,
will give me another minute in order to ask one other question.
This is the last thing I will say. If I don't have commercial crew and I can't get to low Earth orbit, I don't need SLS and Orion. I showed you the exploration roadmap. If I can't get to low Earth orbit, there is no exploration program.
All right, if I could go to my final question then. There was a study done entitled Human and Nature Dynamics, Modeling Inequality and Use of Resources on the Collapse of Sustainability of Societies. And it concluded in part that income inequality contributes to the collapse of societies. It has come to my attention that the study also states, quote, this work was partially funded through NASA/GSFC grant NNX12AD03A, end quote, and that NASA contributed $26,000 to a study on income inequality, or that involved income inequality. Why is NASA spending money that should be related to space exploration, at least in my view, on income inequality issues?
NASA did not request such study. We did not endorse such study. We have not reviewed such study. The study was done at the University of Maryland as an offshoot of a study we did request on another subject. You know, we don't control what a principal investigator chooses to do if they can get additional studies in.
But it's your money. It's $26,000 in NASA funding. Are you telling me that NASA doesn't control what its money is being spent on?
An investigator performs the study that we request, and if they choose to amplify the study with additional information or additional data for their own use, we don't prohibit them from doing that.
Well, thank you for sharing that information.
It is not a NASA study, neither endorsed nor requested by us.
But paid for by NASA, in part.
You got it.
Time has expired. At this time, I want to ask unanimous consent to enter into the record a letter. Oh, I'm so sorry. At this time, I recognize the gentlewoman from Oregon, Ms. Bonamici.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Administrator Bolden, for staying for a second round of questions. I wanted to follow up on the international partnerships and international cooperation, which we've talked about a lot in this subcommittee, and we all appreciate the importance of it. And we've had some discussions about that this morning. But what I wanted to talk about is, in light of the proposal to shut down SOFIA, what are the risks of the international partners coming to view NASA as an unreliable partner, for example? What has been the response of the international community when they found out about the SOFIA proposal?
The only members of the international community concerned about SOFIA so far have been the Germans, because that is our principal partner there. And before we announced the budget, Dr. Jan Werner and I had a long telephone conversation, and that's where we decided that we would set up a co-chaired working group to look at options for SOFIA, and that's what I referred to earlier. A final decision on SOFIA has not been made because we don't know what the 2015 budget is going to say. But as Congressman Brooks says, we are planning for the contingency that we don't get additional money in the science budget for SOFIA, and that would mean that we would then have to phase out of put it in mothballs.
Well, and to follow up on that, even though Germany may be directly the only partner that has expressed concern, what kind of message does that send to the rest of the international community? And have you heard any response from others about questioning why this might happen?
Yeah, a good example would be ExoMars, which everyone was up in arms when we announced that we were having to step back from the initial agreements on ExoMars. When NASA entered into agreement with the European Space Agency on ExoMars, times were better. We were going to provide launch vehicles for the 2016 mission, the 2018 mission. When the 2013 budget was about to come out, I talked to the European partners and I said, look, we had teams in Paris. This was leading into Christmas. And I said, this doesn't make sense. You know, we've got teams working on all this stuff, and I don't know what the 2013 budget's going to be. I cannot in good conscience allow the teams to keep working towards something that we may not be able to support. I said, give us time. Let us look at the budget, and then we'll determine what happens. When the 2013 budget came out, we found out we couldn't provide the launch vehicles that we had earlier promised. They went and negotiated, and Russia, as a partner in ExoMars, agreed that they would do that. We agreed that we could hold up our end of the bargain on a communications package for 2016 and a very important scientific package on 2018. So the partners understood where we were. They go through the same thing. It's just that when they back out of something or they don't make a payment, it doesn't make the front page of the New York Times the way it does when the United States does it.
Thank you. And I asked you earlier about earth science. I want to ask you a question about planetary science. Can you talk a little bit about the continued cuts being proposed for NASA's planetary science program and whether that's consistent in light of the work that NASA plans to undertake on a Mars 2020 rover? How can the cuts to the planetary science program be consistent?
We are holding to a planetary science portfolio that we have brought to this committee and others for a long time. Mars 2020 is still on track. We have to find ways, innovative ways to do missions when budgets are reduced. And our budget has been constantly reduced over time. As I said, the President requested a certain amount since I've been the NASA administrator, and the amount appropriated has always been less than that was requested. And that's forgotten by most people. We have taken the resultant appropriations and we have figured out alternative ways to do things. Sometimes you de-scope a mission. Sometimes you have to cancel it, but we've really canceled very few missions in the time that I've been the NASA administrator because we've been able to find alternatives to how to do it.
Thank you. And even though that may be forgotten by most people, I doubt that it's forgotten by people on the subcommittee. So thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentlewoman yields back. At this time, I ask unanimous consent to enter into the record a letter from the Planetary Society that has been shared with the minority ahead of time. Hearing no objection.
Mr. Chairman, may I get a copy of the letter, or can you remind me or refresh my memory of what it is, because
you can't,
I get all kinds of stuff.
You don't get the right.
I don't get to see it. Okay.
But we'll get you a copy of the letter, of course, in the attachment. So at this time, I want to.
Is it good or bad? Can you give me a hint?
Both.
Both?
Yeah.
They want more money for Mars, and
answer it the way you answer mine.
Do they like Europa?
General Bolin, thank you. Thank you for your valuable testimony and the members for their questions. The members of the committee may have additional questions for you, and we will ask you to respond to those in writing. The record will remain open for 2 weeks for additional comments and written questions from members. The witness is excused, and this hearing is adjourned.
Thank you very much.
This is a microphone test. 1, 2, 3, 4.